What I'm about to share will transform you into a permanent fixture in their thoughts. It won't matter where they are, who they're with, or what activities occupy their time. Their mind will circle back to you repeatedly. This happens not because you're chasing after them or applying pressure, but precisely because you've learned to become that puzzle their consciousness feels compelled to solve. Throughout this presentation, I'll guide you step by step to establish such profound roots in their mental landscape that every attempt to forget you will paradoxically intensify their memories of you. This isn't trickery. It's far from being a simple game. This represents an art form, the art of generating intrigue, attraction, and mystery while maintaining your authentic nature. Once you master this approach, you won't merely occupy their mind. You'll awaken within them that irresistible compulsion to draw closer to understand you better. And as they pursue this understanding, they'll discover they never want to stop trying. Are you prepared? Let's begin. Strategic absence. How do you deliberately step back to spark their need to find you? There exists a truth most people never grasp. Everything that binds two people together doesn't occur solely during their physical proximity. Frequently, the most powerful connections form during separation. Yet this isn't ordinary distance. It's not silence born from anger or childish ultimatums demanding attention. This represents something far more sophisticated, something that directly touches the human instinct to resolve what remains unclear. Let me be straightforward with you. When you're perpetually available, constantly within reach, always ready to respond immediately, their mind has no reason to think about you. And when their mind doesn't need to think about you, their heart unconsciously begins severing the connection. Strategic absence doesn't mean vanishing and hoping for miracles. It means crafting a carefully designed void where your absence feels more intense than your presence ever did, even when you're not physically there. It transforms absence into a constant reminder. Consider this example. A 50-year-old woman, confident in herself, having built her own life, having stopped pursuing things that don't match her frequency. In her relationship, this woman noticed she was always the one initiating messages, making plans, filling silences with conversation to prevent coldness from entering. Until one day she realized this excessive presence resembled leaving the light perpetually on. Eventually, that light becomes invisible. So, she decided to try something different. She stopped initiating every conversation. This wasn't about ignoring him. It was simply about creating spaces for him to fill. When he sent messages, she didn't respond immediately. Where she previously replied within 5 minutes, she now responded after 1 or 2 hours with answers that politely, but indefinitely, closed the conversation. That space allowed him to notice something he'd never seen before. How much pleasure he derived from talking with her, and how hollow he felt when they weren't communicating. Strategic absence works because it triggers the resolution instinct. The human brain dislikes open-ended questions and unknowns. When you consciously create a gap, you force the other person to take action to close it. You don't make that move, they do. And precisely at that moment, they begin investing energy in you. If you're ready to create this space, write "ready" in the comments. Now, the how question here represents the critical point. First, select your timing. Don't do this after an argument or while feeling angry, because then it gets perceived as punishment. Do this when the bond between you is strong, so their mind can distinguish between your usual presence and your strategic absence. Second, control the duration. We're not talking about disappearing for days. We're talking about creating micro absences that get noticed, like not being there during hours when you'd normally be present. Third, close gracefully. When you return, don't provide lengthy explanations about why you were busy. Simply contribute something valuable to the conversation, as if time is your ally, not your adversary. Fourth, avoid patterns. Don't turn this technique into something predictable. The power of strategic absence lies in them not knowing when and why it occurs. And pay attention, we're not discussing manipulation here. We're discussing balance. If a person feels you're always reachable, they lose the need to seek you out. But if they sense your presence as a privilege that naturally appears and disappears, their mind starts working to avoid losing you. Remember this, genuine space doesn't feel like abandonment. It feels like mystery, and mystery doesn't push away, it pulls closer. When you masterfully employ strategic absence, you don't need to tell them to miss you. Their own mind handles that. They'll search for you, not because you applied pressure, but because they can't tolerate the idea of you not being where they want you. And the best part? When they find you again, they'll feel like they've recovered something too valuable to let go. Get ready. Because in the next section, you'll discover how to make them think more by saying less. And when this combines with strategic absence, it becomes an impossible-to-ignore formula. The unfinished statement. How should you speak to make them think more? Hello, how are you? I'll take a brief pause to make a request of you. Perhaps you've been watching these presentations for a long time but haven't subscribed yet. That's truly fine. But if this content adds something to your life, if it accompanies you during important moments, pressing that button right now represents the best way to tell me you want more of this. And believe me, it changes everything. Thank you for being here. Now let's return to that powerful message awaiting you. There's something very few women understand, and when applied, it completely transforms how someone remembers them. This isn't about speaking more beautifully or constructing perfect sentences. This is about not saying everything. The human mind hates open endings. When a story gets cut before resolution, the brain stays fixated there as if something remains incomplete and needs finishing. This mental tension keeps the moment alive and grows with each repetition. The problem is, most people unconsciously do the exact opposite. They provide all the details, they close all doors, they answer every question before being asked, and thus, even unintentionally, they eliminate all mystery and every reason for them to think about them after the conversation. Let me tell you about something that happened. A 48-year-old woman, separated from her spouse for 2 years, living an active life and feeling confident in herself. She'd started seeing someone who seemed very interested, but after each meeting, she sensed him cooling off slightly. One day, while talking with her sister, she realized the situation. Her sister told her something that sparked lightning in her mind. This comment hit her like a slap, and she decided to try something different. The unfinished statement is this. It's not about trying to appear interesting. It's about creating space in the conversation for their mind to work. How? Quite simple. By leaving loose ends, sentences that don't completely close, comments that imply more but remain unexplained at that moment. Let's give an example. If someone asks what you did yesterday, instead of saying we had coffee with friends and then went to the theater, you could say this. Quote 3 and then remain silent. Do you see what happened? Their mind is now engaged, curious. They want to know what happened, what that thing you remembered was. And if you don't immediately tell them, that clue remains active in their mind and forces them to think about you later. Another illustration. Instead of detailing your entire day from beginning to end when they ask how your day went, you might share, "Something unexpected happened today. Made me realize how differently I see certain things now." Then shift the topic or ask them a question. Watch what occurs. Their brain immediately starts filling gaps, constructing scenarios, wondering what changed and why. And this internal work their mind performs creates emotional investment. They're not passively receiving information anymore. They're actively involved in trying to understand you. This is the unfinished statement in action, giving enough to spark curiosity, but withholding enough that their imagination must complete the picture. The technique functions for one specific reason. Completion drives human psychology. Our brains are wired to finish incomplete patterns, resolve unanswered questions, close open loops. When you deliberately leave something unfinished in conversation, you're not being evasive. You're creating what psychologists call a cognitive gap. That gap generates tension, and that tension keeps you present in their thoughts, long after the conversation ends. Here's how to implement this effectively. First principle. Balance revelation with restraint. Share enough to be authentic and engaging, but not so much that nothing remains to discover. Think of it like chapters in a book rather than summarizing the entire story at once. Second principle. Make pauses intentional. When you're about to reveal something significant, consider whether holding back creates more impact. Sometimes, the pregnant pause speaks louder than the explanation. Third principle. Redirect without closing. When they probe for more details, you can gently guide the conversation elsewhere without rudely shutting them down. Something like, "That's actually a longer story. Maybe I'll share it another time when we have more space for it." This acknowledges their interest while preserving the mystery. Fourth principle: never appear withholding as manipulation. The energy matters here. This shouldn't feel calculated or game-playing. It should feel natural, like someone who has depth and doesn't feel the need to display everything immediately. Here's what this approach accomplishes. It positions you as someone with layers, someone worth the effort of understanding. It makes them work mentally to know you, and that work creates investment. It prevents the relationship from becoming too comfortable too quickly, which often leads to diminished interest. It maintains an element of discovery, which keeps attraction alive. The woman from earlier implemented this differently in her next interaction. When her date asked about her weekend, instead of recounting every activity, she said, quote, 6. She didn't explain who, didn't explain what perspective, didn't explain the certainty. She smiled and asked him about his weekend. Later that evening, he circled back. So what perspective changed for you? That's when she knew it worked. He'd been thinking about it, couldn't let it go, had to return to find out more. She shared a small piece then, but still not everything. And this pattern continued, with him consistently returning to learn more, each time more invested than before. Within weeks, he told her, quote, 8. That's the power of the unfinished statement. You're not playing games or being difficult. You're allowing their mind to actively participate in getting to know you, which creates far stronger bonds than passive information receiving ever could. Most importantly, this approach respects both of you. You're not pretending to be mysterious. You're simply recognizing that depth doesn't need to be displayed all at once, and that gradual revelation creates more sustainable interest than immediate total disclosure. When you master this, conversations transform. You stop feeling pressure to fill every silence or explain every detail. You become comfortable with the spaces between words. Understanding those spaces often carry more weight than the words themselves. And they start viewing you not as someone they've figured out, but as someone they're continually discovering. That ongoing discovery is what keeps you present in their mind when you're apart. If you recognize your own worth, write, "I am valuable," in the comments. Now prepare yourself for what comes next. Because we're about to explore something even more powerful than strategic absence or unfinished statements alone. We're going to examine how to create contradictory signals that keep their mind in a constant state of engaged uncertainty. The elegant contradiction. How do you use contrasting signals to maintain their mental engagement? Human psychology operates on pattern recognition. We observe behavior, identify patterns, create predictions about future behavior based on those patterns. This is how we navigate social interactions efficiently. But here's what most people don't realize. Predictability, while comfortable, is also the death of attraction. When someone becomes completely predictable, their brain stops actively processing interactions with you. You become background noise, familiar furniture in their mental landscape. The elegant contradiction changes this completely. It's the strategic use of warmth, followed by distance, engagement, followed by withdrawal, intensity, followed by lightness. Not randomly, but deliberately, creating just enough inconsistency that their mind can't settle into comfortable prediction. Let me clarify immediately what this is not. This is not being hot and cold out of mood swings or poor emotional regulation. This is not playing games or being manipulative. This is not punishing them or being cruel. What it is, it's consciously varying your emotional availability in ways that keep them attentive and invested. It's demonstrating through behavior that you have an interior life they don't control or fully understand. It's creating the experience that connecting with you requires effort and attention, which makes that connection more valuable. Here's a real situation that illustrates this perfectly. A 46-year-old woman, married for 18 years, noticed her marriage had become functionally comfortable but emotionally flat. Her husband was a good man, but he'd stopped really seeing her. She'd become predictable, and predictability had bred a kind of benign neglect. She was always warm, always available, always responsive, and that constancy had paradoxically made her invisible. So she began implementing elegant contradiction. One evening, she was warm and engaged, laughing at his jokes, initiating physical affection. The next day, she was polite but distant, absorbed in a book, responsive but not initiating. Then, 2 days later, she surprised him with his favorite meal and genuine interest in his day. Then she spent an entire evening out with friends, coming home late without explanation beyond, quote, 10, quote, "The change in his behavior was remarkable. He started paying attention. He started seeking her out, asking questions, trying to gauge her mood and interest. He started putting in effort he hadn't shown in years." Not because she was being difficult, but because she'd reintroduced uncertainty into a relationship that had become too certain. Here's how to implement elegant contradiction effectively. First, establish warmth as your baseline. The contradictions only work if there's genuine warmth and connection to contrast against. You're not being cold, you're creating temperature variation. Second, vary intensity unpredictably. Sometimes be deeply engaged in conversation, asking questions, showing real interest. Other times, be pleasant but preoccupied, giving shorter responses, being less available for extended interaction. The key is, they can't predict which version they'll encounter. Third, control your availability variability. Sometimes respond quickly to messages, other times take hours or longer. Sometimes initiate contact, often don't. Sometimes be eager to make plans, sometimes be busy or prefer solitude. This variability prevents them from taking your availability for granted. Fourth, don't explain your energy shifts. Resist the urge to justify why you're less available or more distant. The elegant contradiction doesn't require justification. It simply exists, and that existence creates the mental engagement you're seeking. Fifth, always return with positivity. The power of contradictory signals lies in the distance never being final. When you show warmth again, do it with such genuine energy that they feel they've won you back. This triggers a sense of achievement in their mind and motivates them to seek more of those moments. Write quote 11 in the comments to remember your own worth. This woman told me that initially she thought this might seem manipulative, but she quickly realized it wasn't. She wasn't punishing anyone. She was redefining the value of her presence. By balancing warmth with distance, she not only reignited the attraction in her marriage, she also reclaimed her own emotional autonomy. A renowned psychologist once said the human soul needs tension to grow. In relationships, this tension isn't always conflict. It can be the magnetism created by not knowing exactly what comes next. And here's the most important part. When someone doesn't know whether their next encounter with you will be a warm moment or a quiet, contemplative one, their mind stays engaged. They try to understand you, predict you, figure you out, and this constant pursuit is what keeps them emotionally present. But wait, because the next element, I'm not exaggerating, is the crowning ceremony of this entire strategy. Because it's not just about signals, words, or silences. It's about writing the story they tell themselves about you, so that even when you're not there, their mind replays that story repeatedly. And that's when you stop being an option. You become part of their personal narrative. The invisible story. How do you construct the story they tell about you without them realizing? In every relationship, whether official or not, long or short, one person tells a story about the other. It doesn't matter if they tell it to a friend, family member, or themselves in the shower. There's always a narrative defining what you mean to them. Most women experience this story as something they create, something beyond their control. But what nobody tells them, and what was implied when discussing the power of projection, is this. Quote 12, and you can do this without appearing to be doing it. Because here's the truth. How they feel about you doesn't depend solely on what happens when you're together. It depends on how their mind interprets all of this when you're apart. If you don't take an active role in this interpretation, you risk being transformed into a faded memory, a flat figure, or worse, a side character in their own life. Whereas if you ensure the story they tell themselves about you is rich, emotionally loaded, and unique, they can't help but relive that story, and with each repetition, the emotion grows. Let me share a story. A 49-year-old woman, divorced for 8 years. She met someone with whom she felt an extraordinary connection. But this woman had learned something from years of experience. Sustained interest is maintained not just by being there, but by managing memory. Every time she was with him, instead of pouring out her entire life in endless conversation, she left fragments. Not complete stories, but scenes. That time she traveled abroad alone and had dinner at a stranger's family home, the scent of geraniums on her grandmother's balcony, That sentence a stranger told her on a train that changed her life. Visual, sensory details. Details that left space for him to ask himself what happened next. When they weren't together, she didn't fill the silence with ordinary messages. Sometimes she'd send a photo of coffee in a chipped ceramic cup with the caption, "This reminded me of something you said." Or she'd send a song without explanation. These gestures weren't digital content. They were emotional anchors, forcing him to complete the scene in his mind. Here's how to build your own invisible story. First, think in scenes, not speeches. Instead of narrating your life like a resume, create cinematographic moments in their memory. Scents, sounds, images. These are what stick to emotional memory. Second, deliberately leave things open-ended. Don't explain everything. If you're telling something, save a key detail for another time. This lack of closure is like an episode ending at an exciting point. Third, make symbols work for you. Choose elements that can become your symbols. A song, a location, a scent. If you come to their mind whenever they see or hear these things, you've installed a permanent presence. Fourth, don't repeat the same gesture twice in succession. Have variety in how you plant your story. Sometimes a brief comment, sometimes a physical gesture, sometimes a symbolic gift. Variety prevents them from seeing this as a conscious strategy. Fifth, use withdrawal as part of the script. In the invisible story, you don't need to be always available to strengthen the narrative. Absence is also a chapter. A chapter written in their own mind as they wonder what you're doing right now. This woman confessed something to me that summarizes this point better than any theory. When he talked about her to friends, he wasn't saying, "I'm dating a beautiful woman," or "she's very nice." He was saying things like, "There's something about her I can't explain. It's like every moment we spend together has a meaning larger than it appears." This is what happens when you establish yourself as a mystery living in someone's mind. They don't just think about you, they think through you. You become an emotional filter for their life. And the most powerful part is this story doesn't disappear even with distance or breaks. In fact, time can intensify it, because their mind fills the gaps with the most impressive things you've left in them. When you master this art, you stop competing with other women for their routine or time. Because what competes isn't the person who's there. It's the character living in their story. And when you're that central character, they don't just remember you, they need you for their own story to be meaningful. When you understand that you need to fill their mind, not their time, everything changes. At that moment, you stop exhausting yourself trying to impress and begin building something much deeper. The woman who becomes that mystery, who transforms into that invisible trace they reinforce every time they think about you, doesn't do this to manipulate. She does it to protect her own value and mystery in a world that always demands quick answers. Learn to give your story in doses, leave white spaces, create symbols that represent you. You'll see that they become your narrator. A narrator seeking clues, remembering details, and desiring more. A well-known thinker once said, "The unconscious wants to be completed." And when you're that piece that seems to hold more than they can see, their mind won't rest until it finds the answer. But the answer doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves. Each time a memory of you touches them, when a gesture you left in their path reappears in their life, the real power isn't what you said or did in their presence, but the effect that continues vibrating afterward. This is where attraction transforms into fixation, and interest stops being fragile and becomes part of their personal narrative. If you'll be the mystery in their mind, write, "I am the mystery" in the comments. As always, I love engaging with you, and if this message resonated with you, I invite you to leave your powerful approval, subscribe, and definitely turn on notifications. If supporting this space further speaks to your heart, you can become a member now. You can benefit from privileges like receiving priority responses to your comments and psychological questions, participating in deciding topics for upcoming presentations, and having closer companionship through the transformation process. Before you go, I've left 2 presentations on screen for you. Both will elevate your mind to a completely different level. Whichever you choose, I'm confident it will serve you well. This is Mental Dose. Let's continue exploring the depths of mind and spirit together. See you in the next presentation.